I got out of the Moonies. I gave over the speeches. I answered all their questions. I naively thought the congressional investigation would shut down the cults, like they didn't know all about them. Later, this man, Robert Betcher, said George Bush Sr. was the head of the CIA during this investigation. He personally told me that Bush did everything possible to undermine the investigation. And essentially, I think it was 18 days after the final report, Jonestown happened, and Leo Ryan was assassinated. He was on the committee investigating the Moonies and the Korean CIA. And
let me add a little nugget for you. You might have not even known this, that Bill Barr was Bush's chief of communication, or whatever you want, for the Congress. So he was the one running everything the CIA had to do with the Congress. So I believe that
really
Bill Barr may be the person, I'm just guessing, is spitballing a little bit, that he may be the one who helped Bush bury that investigation. He was known, even back then, as the cover-up general.
The fixer.
So, the fixer. So
the fixer.
And he also covered up Robert Hanssen, the biggest FBI Russian spy of all time. He minimized his Opus Dei involvement, which was extreme Opus Dei. Hanssen, that he totally
covers up a lot of things. He covered up Iran-Contra. He covered up but there's a few, the
Trump. Moonies were involved with Iran-Contra too, Zev, by the way.
They were not. Oh, really?
100%.
Oh.
Funding it, Washington Times, North.
Right.
Absolutely. They were part of the World Anti-Communist League. So let me just tell you the origin story of the Moonies, and you'll get it. I hope you'll get it. And again, I put this all in my book, Combating book.
Yeah.
So Steve was invited to D.C. by then Senator Bob Dole. After Jonestown, they were going to have a hearing about cults. So I was asked to speak. A survivor of Jonestown was asked to speak. I fly down to D.C., and there are people picketing with signs, elect Bob Dole president, repeal the First Amendment. This is a religious witch hunt, yada, yada, yada. Then I'm told, you're off the program, Steve.
Wow.
The ex-Jonestown and then I went, there's something fishy here. And then I went and I read all 11 volumes of the investigation, which had the transcripts, which included the founder of the Korean CIA, who said under oath that he, quote, organized and utilized the Unification Church for use as a political tool.
What does that mean? Does it mean he started it, or does it mean he...
No, it means it was in existence, but they wanted a proxy group as a front to do re-education programs like that China had been doing in the 50s to counter North Korean brainwashing. They wanted to do Western brainwashing to stabilize South Korea. And it was only later that some brilliant person, and that's in quotes from the CIA or whatever, said, let's bring them to the United States to counter all the lefties on college campuses that are trying to get us to leave Vietnam.
That's so interesting.
So
I thought the CIA wasn't allowed to operate here.
On campus.
Yeah. All right. That's interesting.
So the point is, you know, a lot of Trump supporters are angry at the deep state, the loaded term for the intelligence community, right?
Yeah.
What they don't understand is this is a black op of our intelligence, but every other major country does black ops too, and uses proxy groups to fight wars in places so they can say it wasn't us.
Yeah, of course.
But in fact, I was programmed to die on command or kill on command. I was literally told by Moon that if North Korea invaded South Korea, the Americans, including me, would be sent to the front lines to die. So the Americans would come in militarily and defend South Korea.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're going to be used as a
great father. Sure, we'll do it, father. Yay!
So you were basically told you were going to be sacrificed at the border so the Americans would come and that's amazing. I didn't know that at all. Didn't Moon originally start off being supportive of North Korea? Did he start off
He
on the
was
North Korea?
born in North Korea.
Yeah.
And here's another little nugget.
Yeah.
This is the other Bush presidency, the younger Bush, when it was, remember his axis of evil, and he said North Korea was the axis of evil. So the younger Bush says axis of evil, and I'm hearing about the Moonies setting up a car factory in North Korea, a hotel in North Korea. So I go to my congressman, then Barney Frank, in his office.
Yeah.
I say, and Barney was willing to sponsor, by the way, a cult awareness day on November 18th in honor of Jonestown and in honor of Leo Ryan's assassination, never passed. But anyway, I said, Barney, how could we be allowing the Moonies to do stuff in North Korea if they're the axis of evil? He said, I'll get back to you. And then like a month later, he said, special dispensation, Steve.
Whatever that means. Interesting.
Yeah. So was the intelligence community using the Moonies to build bridges with the North Korean leadership? Very
Probably.
plausible to me.
Very plausible. I mean, that's how you
Yeah.
do things if you're an intelligence organization. It's just so surprising, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, but how close they are to the former president of the United States. That seems to me like a
So back to Trump
Yeah.
and being paid. So George Bush, who tried to block this investigation, was given $2 million for one speech by the Moonies after he left the presidency. So I figure, with the years and inflation, maybe they paid Trump $4 million or $5 million for a 5-minute endorsement, because they have endless amounts of money.
From the CIA of all places. Heidi, I've been talking so much and captivated by all of this. So jump in here, and also the viewers have to
questions.
ask. Yeah.
One thing is, didn't Bush Senior have a little something to do with the CIA?
He was the director.
He was the head of
I know.
No, he was the
Anyway,
director, and he blocked the investigation because the CIA was doing an op, and they don't want people to know about it. And how can a convicted felon own and operate a newspaper in our nation's capital without some very powerful people protecting it?
And we're talking about post-Watergate here, aren't we?
Yeah.
100%.
So,
and by the way, I fasted for Nixon.
Oh,
for
we're
3
going
days
to get
on
there. We're going to get there.
steps.
I've got pictures and everything. But first, Heidi, let's keep going with some of the questions here that from you or from the audience. But there's so much more to come. It's really
There's
exciting.
so much more to come, and we'll probably be unfolding these. But of course, the burning desire, which we can either deliver a little bit of now or include more at the end. The burning desire is people need help dealing with their MAGA relatives, how to undo their programming. They're looking for tips. They're absolutely desperate. And so we can either offer a few words of advice now, so, people can get some relief, or we can build up to that.
Let's do it now. I think people really want to know.
Well, let me start by saying, when I first got out of the Moon cult, I couldn't call it a cult for months. It was too embarrassing. And I was sure I wasn't brainwashed, but I agreed to the deprogramming just to prove my family wrong. And fortunately, I woke up and I was willing to eat crow and go and cry and just say, I'm so sorry that I put you all through this. And, I was
How long was the deprogramming?
5 days.
5 days.
But it followed 2 weeks away from the cult, where I had nearly died in a van crash due to sleep exhaustion.
Right.
So that's what primed me to call my sister, even though I was under orders not to tell my family where I was. Lesson number 1 about mind control: it's not 100%. It doesn't erase your brain. Anyone who has a loved one in a cult who's given up hope and says they'll never leave, you're wrong. You're just plain wrong. And I have a blog with a man who was in the Moonies for 36 years. He got involved when I was in. He left there a number of years ago. People will leave, but there are things that we can do within our control to open doors, to plant seeds, to undo phobia indoctrination. Why? Because the thing about mind control, brainwashing, thought reform, coercive control, all of these terms basically refer to undue influence. The patterns are all the same, pretty much. Not the ideology, but in my model, which I call the BITE model of authoritarian control, it stands for behavior control components, information control, thought control, and emotional control components. And on my website, there's a list like sleep deprivation, change clothes, change diet, report everything, rigid rules. So there are lists under each one of these.
This is not this list, right? This is
so this isn't. Keep that one up, because the BITE model is what you use to apply with the influence continuum.
Okay.
The more behavior is controlled, where you're dependent and obedient, the more you are on the destructive, unhealthy side. And if you're asked to use your conscience, think for yourself, love-based, you can leave without threats or coercion, you're in a healthy cult. Because I do think cults are on a continuum all the way across the top.
Makes sense.
The critical thing I want to say is this dual identity at the upper right. It says false cult identity. And the easiest way to explain it to your listeners is, I was Steve Hassan, son of Milton and Estelle Hassan. I got into the Moonies. Now I'm the son of Sun Myung Moon and Hak Jahan, the true parents of the universe, believing that Milton and Estelle were just my physical parents because they were satanic. And it was this cult identity that suppressed the real Steve, but did not erase the real Steve. And people leave cults because their real self is still in there. But the most important thing is having family, friends, and caring outsiders who are willing to respectfully engage, develop rapport and trust, ask non-threatening questions. And there are rules, and I've written a whole book called Freedom of Mind on the techniques, but I've also done a ton of blogs on Trump, MAGA, QAnon. And the rules are: you never attack the leader, the doctrine, or the group head on. You never try to just persuade them with facts, because it initiates the phobia programming. It triggers the thought stopping techniques that members are taught to do on themselves. And it alienates them from you because they feel like you're persecuting them. So the art is really learning about another group that they think is a cult, talking about mind control there, engaging actively first, going through the patterns, and then asking. The other critical thing is, the most powerful technique is asking a good question and being quiet while the person thinks about it, and giving long silences. Most people who've blocked their loved ones, cut off from them, got to a point where they felt so upset and overwhelmed, and they were given 60 links of things and told to do your research because I've done mine. And that is the Putin brand of, fire hose propaganda. Just like throw so much spaghetti against the wall until the person surrenders or runs away. And that's what most family members and friends are like, stop.
But you're saying that's not the right approach. Do not cut people off. You've got to stay engaged.
Never cut off, but you can say, I respect you. You're intelligent. You're my brother. You're my sister. You're my uncle. You're my aunt. I don't understand how you believe what you believe, but I'm giving you my word. All I want is to know what's true.
Right.
And what's factual. So let's make a deal. I'm willing to be open-minded. You pick one thing that was important in your conversion that made you believe this. Let's watch it together or read it together, discuss it. Then it's my turn to give you one thing to discuss. And
that's really nice and respectful. Yeah.
And the thing is, and I'm going to plug someone else's book because I love it so much. Sure. Think Again by Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist. And in his book, which is absolutely brilliant, he basically says, disconnect your beliefs, from your identity. and just adopt a I want to know what's true frame,
Right.
and be ready to change your mind and
Mm.
seek out alternative points of view to test your current beliefs to see whether or not you need to change anything.
Yeah, you might be in a cult without knowing
Yeah,
it.
and I'm accused all the time
Yeah.
by Trumpers that I'm in the cult of the libtards or George Soros or whatever, and I'm like, really? I'm so curious. Tell me what you understand as brainwashing.
Wow,
I
that's really
thought I
interesting.
knew what it was, but please enlighten me. And then they have nothing else to say, right?
Right.
Because they were just given
They give
that
you the one
level.
line.
Yeah,
You
the
do.
one
I've
liner.
been in conversations with people about vaccinations, and they are anti-vax, and there are valid reasons to argue that. I think, it's not sensible. It doesn't make sense in my world. But when you confront them, they immediately come back at you with, "Oh, you're just one of those, liberals, or you're one of those deniers, or whatever, whatever the word they want to use about you." And then,
So what I want to
Yeah.
add, if I may, is
I
just
get that. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's great. So the influence continuum, it's not left and right.
Mm.
It's authoritarian is the bad side,
Mm-hmm.
and human rights and law-abiding citizens.
Right.
So when people say, "Oh, you only criticize right-wing groups," I say, "No, I criticize a lot of left-wing groups. They can be authoritarians too."
Right.
I do interviews with former members of those too. And here's the thing with people who are Trump, MAGA, etc., they all want to learn about Chinese communist brainwashing, right? Because they're the bad guys. So they're open to that.
Right.
So I get to talk all about what I learned about Chinese communist thought reform. And they also are against traffickers and pimps, which is another area I have an expertise in.
Right.
So I talk about the bite model as traffickers and pimps use to groom and recruit and indoctrinate people.
Right.
But the point is getting the information into their head in a way that they've accepted it in those contexts, and then asking them questions. So tell me, so in the Scientology, you're not allowed to talk to ex-members or critics. Have you ever talked to an ex-believer in QAnon? And if not, why not? I'm just curious. Are you afraid?
Yeah.
Can I arrange an introduction for you?
So let's take this a step further if we could. Let's think about this as a political campaign for the Democrats. If you were, positioning yourself as the party that's in favor of democracy and you're competing against an autocratic party, what would be your suggestion for them in terms of an advertising campaign that takes in this kind of information targeted at conservative or right-wing or MAGA voters?
Thank you for asking the question. There are some things I would say publicly and other things that I've thought about that I would say privately to people who actually wanted to know strategy. But essentially what's missing, and the media has been horrible, mainstream media, everybody's been horrible, is getting experts on who can explain social psychology, who can explain, oh, here's a clip. This is called projection. This is a cognitive dissonance manipulation. This is sunk cost fallacy, where you invest in a certain course of action and even though you realize it's not going to get you to the goal, you keep doing it because you put so much into it already. The public needs to learn about how the mind works. The public needs to get over the myth of invulnerability. Oh, only stupid people get into cults. And I skipped 8th grade and I was an extra honors student, so I could never be in a cult. And the other part of it is the big motivations. They say, what are people's motivations, Steve, for getting involved with cults? So first of all, they don't think it's a cult when they get involved, but the motivation is typically they want to improve themselves, more self-awareness, understanding, more self-efficacy, power, etc. Or they want to make the world a better place. They want to help other people. They want to do good. Those two. Now, if you're a selfish, complacent hedonist, they're not going to get recruited by a cult. They don't want you.
Right.
They will step aside you. They want the young, and not just young, like elderly too, especially if you have money or special power. I mean, special talents for whatever. They want competent, capable, functioning people, not with mental illness, with drug addictions and other things where they have to take care of the member.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was told to recruit people at my level or higher. And
Makes
I was
total sense.
actually yelled at because I approached a homeless man because he was not good quality.
Which is just exactly what you would not expect a church to really do. But there you go. So.
No kidding, because
Yeah.
it's not a church.
You're right. It's not a church. We've learned that. He's not a reverend. Heidi, let's see if we can fit in a couple of more questions. And if
I
Dr.
do.
Hassan can
You know,
stay with us for a little bit, that would be great.
great thing about having
so.
studied your work and had you on the show already is that you've given so much insight that I now feel like when I observe some of these charlatans, it's all the same tricks. It's like the whole same bag of tricks. And so what Zev and I have been putting together is we realize that they're selling fear. You have all these little fiefdoms in the major cult of Trump, and they're all selling fear for one way or another. Usually, just like you said with Felon Moon, they have some corruption, some money scam they're working on. This is kind of something that we put together. So the bottom guy you'll recognize is Todd Callender, the Bahamas-based lawyer who went down to Texas to sell fear about the vaccination, who's has this anti-vaxx site, promoting various drugs. And then he has ties to Russia. And then his family has a vaccine company doing a big deal in India. Right there in the center is a woman we've been tracking, Lee Dundas. She's another lawyer. She goes up and down and all over the place to try to scare people out of vaccines and masking. And she terrorizes school boards and has brought Nazi flags, and school board people have resigned because of her. The guy above there is a pastor who's been on a month-long tour in America. Essentially, all the same tricks, anti-vax. Of course, Trump. Dr. Simone Gold, her organization we said at the top of the show, just got, exposed for having been profiteering off of selling anti-vax rhetoric and then offering the drugs that they push. And of course, there's another son of Felon Moon. But we've just, we'd love you to speak on that, because it seems to me that they all are using the same bag of tricks that was done on you in 1974. Love bombing people, instilling fear. And these people who show up at the school boards after they've been radicalized by these folks really seem traumatized.
Yeah, it's really true. But what's different now is the internet and AI and all of these platforms. And I'm a fan of Tristan Harris and the Center for Humane Technology. And on one of his podcasts, he has a hypnotist on talking about how hypnosis is not sleep, it's focused attention, where your critical faculties are suspended. And what's happening when people are on platforms for hours after hours after hours without break is your mind goes numb.
Right.
And things start coming in. And when you have billionaires with tech abilities to mine the data, find 5,000 data points on every voting American, find which buttons to push on you, organize a group of bots as well as people to work on you for a few weeks and deliver certain content. That's how cults are recruiting now, is online.
And we mentioned the Alpha server at the top of the show. That is how Donald Trump got all that data. That's how they were able to mine the voters in the way they were able to mine it. So that's really interesting. It's all about fear, it seems. I'm so stunned by the crossover between religion and politics at these events. Like, we were watching the one having a religious service. It was hypnotic in many ways, actually, now that you say that.
Well, a lot of these groups do audible prayers, and the Moonies did it too. And not to offend anybody, but when you're talking like this, oh, Father, please save America. America's falling apart now. Please open your hearts, open up your wallets, and donate now.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the game, the methodology, the BS, ministries, which has nothing to do with Jesus Christ and the older New Testament, where you say you believe 100% and God will bless you and give you millions of dollars, which is what the scammers in MLMs do as well. This kind of believe it 100%, it's magically going to appear, right?
Yeah.
And the bigger picture is that genuine spiritual hunger, genuine spiritual desire is being manipulated and exploited by bad people.
Yeah.
People who don't have conscience, they have no empathy, they ignore the golden rule, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Let's go back to basics of being kind and loving and thoughtful and compassionate and doing good deeds and
like
paying
that.
it forward. That's the America I want to live in.
Absolutely.
And I want to just add a quick true story. I'm in the Moonies. It's 75. It's 90 degrees in Manhattan. I'm fundraising and I'm thirsty and I'm hot and I'm sweating. And someone said, "You look like you're thirsty. Can I buy you a drink?"
That's very
now,
nice.
They're supposed to be satanic.
Right.
And they're being nice to me and I'm thirsty and I can't use God's money to buy myself a drink without permission from my leader. So I let him buy a drink. And so I was grateful, nice guy. And then he said, "When was the last time you talked with your family? Let's dial them up now." And I'm sure they'd love to hear. And he dialed up my house and I talked with my mother. This was just an act of kindness from some random person. People in cults are real people. They're good people. And they're even better when they get free, because our greatest national resource is our people.
That's a beautiful line. You said something really powerful that I want to bring up because I think it really buttons up a lot of what we work on. And, Zeb and I have been working on this show. And it was that the big state actors are wanting power, money, and sex to control the world. For them, cyber warfare and psychological warfare is the 21st century nuclear arms race.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love you to expound on that a little bit for our viewers.
Yeah, I mean, we rushed to do the Manhattan Project to beat Hitler to the nuclear bomb, right? And I've been saying, why don't we do like a version of the Manhattan Project on how to get out of the mess we're currently in? But nobody stepped up to put the funds and bring the people together to say, let's really problem solve this.
Isn't that interesting? There's always funding for the other side. It feels like there's an enormous side of funding.
There's lots of money for military hardware. But what's happened is, and the experts will say it, warfare is now in the cyber realm. It's in the psychological warfare realm. I happen to have been a leader in a cult that did this stuff. And I've spent 45 years learning this stuff. And I have lots of colleagues who are ex-members, and many are mental health professionals who understand the mindset and understand the kinds of things we need to do to help people to wake up. But there's resistance. Why? I have theories like all the authoritarian cults, like Opus Dei, the family that Mike Pence was in,
CIA,
Apostolic Reformation, the neo-Nazis, the Coke industries. You can go down the list of all the authoritarians.
Speaking of authoritarians, and I'm just going to do this because we said we were going to, so I'm going to force you into asking. You were there on this day. This is
where am I? I don't see myself.
Where are you? Let's see if we'll look through some other pictures here. We don't actually see you, but you tell us you were there.
So that was Neil Salonen in this picture.
Yeah.
And I was actually, Moon moved the headquarters from DC to Manhattan and made the national headquarters in Manhattan. And I was moved into the national headquarters to be an example for Neil Salonen, that guy, to follow, because Moon liked my type of Mooney, because I would do whatever I was told without question.
And look, these pictures are really fascinating to me. I actually didn't know this event took place, but this was a 3-day prayer event during Watergate. And they were basically praying for Nixon and everybody, I guess, involved in the Watergate committee hearings, but still mostly for Nixon. And these pictures are stunning to me, that everyone's walking around with these. This is a Korean cult protesting for Nixon in broad daylight. I mean, it just seems so odd. It just feels like it doesn't fit in.
I was there.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you a quick story. I know we're running over, but I have to tell you this story. So my father had a hardware store, that he got from his father in Ozone Park. Wanted me to take it. I didn't want to. I wanted to be an English writing person. And he voted for Nixon. I voted for McGovern. And we would fight at the dinner table because I'd be like, Dad, how could you vote for him? He's such a crook.
Yeah.
He's so tricky dicky. Come on, Dad, wake up.
Yeah.
Like, smell the coffee, right? So I'm in the cult. They send me to DC. I'm fasting. The cult Steve goes, let me call my father. Hey, Dad, I'm in the Capitol. I'm fasting for Richard Nixon to be president. My father says, Steve, you were right. He's a crook. I said, Dad, you don't understand. God wants him to be president. He said, Steve, now I know you're brainwashed. The guy's a crook. True story.
That's a good story, actually. You know, it's interesting that I'll just leave you with one last thing here, because you asked last time if we knew that OANN was part of the Washington Times or connected to the Washington Times organization. And the way we found out is because apparently the owner of OAN, we think at least one of the people involved in this prayer event in 1970, whatever it was. And we know that it's part of the Washington Times newspaper group because the original plan was for OANN to launch as a part of the Washington Times. It was essentially a partnership between this private company and the Washington Times to start a TV network off the back of the Washington Times. So, you know, many years later, it still operates. Same owners. I suspect the same owners get the same money from the same Moonies as the Washington Times, because there's no real other way for these people to survive as a network. So,
I found out that James Whalen, the founding editor of the Washington Times, was a longtime Council for National Policy member.
Ah. Yes, I read the Moonies were all about that in the CNP. So
all the players are still around for decades later, and Sean Moon was at the January 6th. A couple of Moonies, I think, were arrested, and they are buying compounds to train people for civil war with his brother Justin's gun factory.
Exactly.
It makes assault rifles.
Yeah. And Trump rifles. So there you go. Dr. Steve Hassan, thank you so much for being here tonight. Always such a pleasure to have you. I wish we would have gotten to more your questions, and I apologize I dominated so much of the conversation, but I can't stop talking to you. There's so much good in what you're talking about, and the idea of just, you know, being good and just and bringing kindness back to the world is such an important principle. As nasty as this battle is going to get over the next, especially into the next elections, I think it's so important that we keep that piece of America alive, that piece of, you know, civility, kindness, because that is really very attractive. It's way more attractive than wanting to go to vote for the other side. So thank you so much for underlining that.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and I apologize if I have interrupted you a few times. One more thing I want to say that I think is going to be a positive force, which is I'm part of the I Got Out #IGotOut movement, igotout.org.
Right.
And the idea behind this is if enough people start sharing their cult mind control experiences, we can destigmatize it. If everyone starts a conversation in their communities, online and whatever, it's going to be an exit ramp for all the people who are in the cult of Trump to leave without feeling like they're dumb or stupid or ashamed or embarrassed, because other people will have told their stories, which they would hear over and over again. Different groups, different ideologies. Let's be kind to each other, please.
I love that. The Cult of Trump is the name of the book. A leading cult expert explains how the president uses mind control, by Stephen Hassan. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And Heidi, any last thoughts from you?
Just thank him so much for that kindness message. I think when we're following the grifters and the money laundering and, you know, the all the profiteering, that message is really, really profound. And the last thing I want to say is one of our viewers has a 40-year-old son. Her name is Martha, and she's devastated because he's full MAGA. You already gave some great tips. Do you have like one last thought or key word for her?
Yeah, you're not alone. And if you have access to the internet, go to my website and put Trump and look at the blogs, because I give long videos and blogs explaining a lot of details. I went on a Reddit, it was QAnon Casualties, I think it was. and I answered questions for hours, and we recorded the best, the most popular,
great.
important ones. So there's a lot of material for free if you want it, and just know that there's hope, and love is stronger than mind control. I think that's the line I want to end with.
That's a good
Love
line.
is stronger than it's real love isn't conditional. It's love for your beingness. Cults suck. Cults only love you if you are obedient and do what they want you to do. They don't love you the minute you question or exit.
Absolutely.
And people can feel it when they're genuinely loved.
And we really are in that, moment in history where we're all having to choose where we're going to go. And, the battle is between autocracies, which is really cults. Really, that's what it's about. That's how they build themselves. And the alternative is countries that still have, some sort of human self-determination, democracies, places where you can express yourself, people be yourself, share your emotions. And the battle between autocracy and democracy is the same as between being in a cult and not being in a cult. So thank you, Dr. Hassan, and thank you, Heidi, and thanks to everyone who watched at home. This was a really amazing show, and we really had a good time. And we'll be back on Friday with the after show with LB and Greg, and we'll see you then. Have a good night, everybody.